It's time for KP's Video News. KP Video News, y'all.
That's right, folks. This is going to be a DUNCE, DC DUNCE episode. DC DUNCE. Got to be a DC DUNCE heavy episode. We got to get rid of him. The DC DUNCE must go. It's going to be a DUNCE heavy episode right here. So, the DC DUNCE appointees stymie recommendations to boost minority voting. Members of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights who were appointed by President Trump voted to shelve a report on threats to minority voting during the coronavirus pandemic. The report, which had been worked on for months, included a behemoth of recommendations and commissioner statements. At an August meeting, one of the commissioners highlighted issues raised in the report, including difficulties with in-person and mail-in balloting faced by voters of color, people with disabilities, and those with medical conditions that make them vulnerable to the virus. So, the commission did not immediately respond to a request for comment, but the commission stated that the report is not for public consumption. All commission reports, as well as finding and recommendations, must pass through a majority vote. As that did not occur, so unfortunately we cannot share. The report was compiled as mail-in voting has grown in popularity among the pandemic, and the president has claimed several times without evidence that increased mail-in voting leads to increased voter fraud. Conservative attorney Adams, who was appointed to the commission 2 weeks before the report was produced, stated that the report overlooked the disenfranchising effect of mail-in voting. Stephen Gilchrist, a Southern Carolina businessman appointed in May, stated that the report was somewhat suspect coming so close to the election. Catherine Lemon, a California civil rights lawyer who was appointed by President Obama in 2016, stated that she is deeply dismayed with the commissioner's decision to shelve the report. I am deeply dismayed that after months of work on a topic that is core to the commission's congressional change, it has been now for 6 decades for the commission not to speak to this moment, which is unlike any other in terms of effort to vote in the history of this country, with the coronavirus and the epidemic and the pandemic that's going on right now. It's extremely difficult. So, on to the next story. And I told you this is a DC DUNCE heavy edition. And so the DC DUNCE administration wanted to use a heat ray on protesters, which Pentagon refused to deploy in Iraq. The Trump administration sought to use a heat ray that the Pentagon refused to deploy in Iraq to deal with protesters who were forcibly cleared from Lafayette Square so Trump could have a photo op in front of a historic church. Federal officials asked about crowd control devices, including a long-range acoustic device that's called an LRAD and an active denial system, ADS, hours before the protesters were cleared from the square near the White House on June 1st. At the time, demonstrations sparked by police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis had royal cities across the United States, including Washington, D.C. The D.C. National Guard, Major DeMarco's written remarks to the House Natural Resources Committee, which is investigating the use of force against protesters in Lafayette Square on June 1st, were reported. And DeMarco told lawmakers that the Defense Department's top military police officer for the Washington region had emailed the D.C. National Guard around 11:35 a.m. on June 1st, asking if they had an LRAD or ADS. DeMarco, who was copied on the email, said he responded just after noon saying they did not have either device. The ADS, developed by the military as a means to disperse crowds is designed to make people feel like their skin is on fire within the range of its invisible being. But there have been concerns about the safety as well as the ethics of using it. And according to the Pentagon, officials were reluctant to use the technology in Iraq if it's not clear if the device was ever actually been deployed in combat. So the Trump administration had considered using the device on migrants at the U.S. border days before the 2018 midterm elections. And according to the newspaper, it was stated that the Secretary of Homeland Security would not authorize the use of such device and that it should never be brought up again in her presence. Yet, in the email to D.C. National Guard in June, DeMarco said that the National Capital Region wrote, the ADS can provide our troops a capacity they currently do not have, the ability to reach out and engage potential adversaries at a distance well beyond small arms range in a safe, effective, and non-lethal manner. And according to DeMarco, the email address, the ADS can immediately compel an individual to cease threatening behavior or depart through application of a directed energy beam that provides a sensation of intense heat on the surface of the skin. The effect is overwhelming, causing an immediate repel response by the targeted individual. A Defense Department official briefed on the matter stated that the emails asking about specific weaponry were routine inventory checks to see what equipment was available. DeMarco's testimony has also contradicted the Trump administration's claim that the demonstration in the square in front of the White House were violent and they were given ample warning to disperse. The U.S. Police Park Chief Gregory Monahan testified that protesters were given clear warning to disperse with an LRAD, also known as a sound cannon. But DeMarco said that when he was at Lafayette Park that evening, he was told by Park Police Sergeant that the device wasn't on site. He said the police officers issued orders to disperse using a handheld microphone attached to a red and white megaphone. DeMarco said he had been standing around 30 yards from the commander making the announcement and said it was barely audible. Police are legally required to give repeated clear warning for demonstrators to disperse before any escalation. And protesters said they never heard any warnings before the officers on foot and horseback moved in to clear the area, charging into a peaceful crowd and clubbing protesters, as well as deploying several rounds of chemical irritants and other munitions. Minutes after the forceful clearing, the D.C. DUNCE headed to St. John's Episcopal Church, where he held the Bible upside down as he posed for photographs. And it's, a sickening situation that we got to deal with this, man, on a daily basis. But as it goes, here we go. We got some new sex assault allegations made against the D.C. DUNCE, made against Trump. A former model has accused Donald Trump of groping and forcibly kissing her in 1997. The latest allegation made against the Republican incumbent just weeks before he seeks re-election. Amy Doris told Britain's The Guardian that Trump sexually assaulted her in his VIP suite at the U.S. Open tennis tournament in New York and claims he denied via his lawyer. He just shoved his tongue down my throat and I was pushing him off. That's when his grip became tight and his hands were very gropey all over my butt, breast, back, everything, Doris said in an interview. I was in his grip and I couldn't get out of it, she added. Trump has faced more than a dozen allegations of sexual misconduct, including a claim by prominent columnist E. John Carroll that he raped her in a department store changing room in the mid-90s. But he brushed him aside in his run to the White House. Shortly before the 2016 election, a tape recording emerged from 2005 when she's heard boasting about how his fame allowed him to grab women by the genitals when he wanted to. Trump dismissed this as clear locker room banter, but subsequently apologized. Doris, 24 at the time of the alleged incident, Trump was 51 and married at the time to his second wife, Marla Maples. The accuser provided with the situation with several photos showing her in Trump's company, and multiple people corroborated her account, saying she told them at the time. She said she told Trump to stop, but he didn't care, she added. I felt violated. Asked why she continued to be around Trump in subsequent days, Doris responded, that's what happens when something traumatic happens. You freeze. But Trump's attorneys told the newspaper that her version of the events was unreliable, and they suggested any comments that the allegation could be politically motivated. Doris, now 48, said she decided to come forward to be a role model for her teenage twin daughters. She told the Guardian her story more than a year ago, but asked the newspaper not to publish it. I'm sick of him getting away with this, she stated. And he's been, wow, he's just a pervert for real, man. A real pervert, Jack. A real pervert. And so then, you know, with this, you know, this is another story, you know, another DC DUNCE related story. And this is like Seattle Mayor and Bill Barr reported suggesting that prosecutors charge her. And Seattle's mayor said a report indicating that Attorney General William Barr instructed federal prosecutors to consider targeting her for charges over the decision to allow protesters to establish an area free from police presence during the weeks of protests in the city is chilling. In a statement issued on Twitter Wednesday, Mayor Durkin said that Barr's reported actions represented an attempt to subvert the law and the use of the Department of Justice for political purposes. The DOJ cannot become a political weapon operated at the behest of the president to target those who have spoken out against his actions. This is an act of tyranny, not democracy, she continued, adding, I will continue to fight for what I believe in and what I believe is right, and I will not be distracted by these threats from meeting the challenges facing our great city, a pandemic, an economic crisis, a climate crisis, and a civil rights reckoning. Barr also suggested during the same call that federal prosecutors seek to charge protesters whenever possible, including with crimes as severe as sedition. And sedition is almost like treason. So, you know, yeah, the mayor this summer met with demonstrators in the Capitol Hill organized protest zone and informed them at the time the police would peacefully evict protesters from the area in the near future, and eventually follow through with that order following several shootings in the area. And telling you, man, you know, you got Barr coming out talking about the radical left and all this other stuff, and they not saying a word, not one word about the Proud Boys, about the Nazis, neo-Nazis, about the Klan, or any other those far-right groups, white ring groups that are out there shooting at people and doing all this crazy stuff. They're not saying a word about that. So, you know, if you can't tell the whole truth, just shut the hell up. That's what I got to say about that one.
Video news, y'all.
Peace.